Hi, welcome back to Mysteries Channel. This was a very hard chapter for me. First, because I'm not a religious person, the names were foreign to me, and I was really trying to be able to say them in a way that people would be able to connect what I'm saying with the name that's in the original text, like the text that he's talking about, the Bible and the ancient glyphs, religions of old and today. And so I apologize for that now. I really did try, I swear. Second, sometimes the author is taking liberties with math and generations, and I try to go back to try to figure that out as well, and, well, I'm not the one. So I wanted to see exactly how his math and the generations of people corroborate to what he is talking about in his book, and, well, that would take a long time for me to figure out. So in the end, I just kind of skimmed over it the way he talks about it. And also, I want you to know that, fair warning, this chapter is kind of all over the place, and there are times that I am trying to consolidate it and organize it a bit, but not in a way that changes what the author is trying to convey. So if you have any questions about any of the stuff that I said, if it doesn't make sense to you, some of it wasn't even making sense to me when I'm reading it. I, honest to God, was like, this was classified by the CIA? Like, what the hell is going on around here? If you have any questions about it, remember Roxy left a copy of the uncensored book on a pinned comment for chapter 1. You can look at it for free. It's pretty awesome. So, here we go. Chapter 3, the story.
Enigma, Pursuit, Unraveling. The author talks of persistent questions that plague people from childhood to adulthood. For him, the story of Adam and Eve was a persistent question that gnawed at him. He knew it wasn't as simple as the two alternatives, either unquestioning faith in the matter or to believe it as utter nonsense. For the author, the revelation came to him after studying the tumble cataclysm cycle of the earth. After years of data correlation from many types of sciences such as stratigraphy, archaeology, anthropology, paleontology, radiology, oceanography, seismology, and glaciology, he knew that the last tumble had occurred around 6,500 years ago. While going through the data, he saw all the different accounts of Noah, also known as Utnapishtim. Speaking with friends, he realized that Genesis 1 describes the conditions that the planet must have gone through after the last tumble. Looking at Genesis 2, he sees that it even mentions mists or flood went up from the earth and watered the whole face of the ground. This leads him to think that Genesis 2 is a tumble previous to Noah, maybe even the time of Adam and Eve. Coming to this conclusion, he wanted to know what language this account was first written in. He speaks of Don Antonio Batres Waraki and James Churchwood because of their knowledge of prehistoric languages, but then goes on to examine the history of Genesis 1, 2, and 3. He believes that Moses is the originator because he was reared in a royal house of Egyptian tradition. This would have given Moses access to many religious writings and teachings. Certainly, the 10 Commandments were a condensation of 42 questions of Osiris for entering heaven. Chan believes if Moses did write part of the Old Testament, then he must have had the Naga tablet writings, or Egyptian interpretations of them, writings that had been handed down by the Egyptian priesthood for thousands of years. This has Chan conclude that the Egyptian priesthood had known of the cataclysm 11,500 years ago. It is said that the priests of Egypt told Solon during his 10 years in Egypt that 9,000 years before that time, a cataclysm buried Atlantis beneath the ocean. Moses' brother Aaron became the first chief priest of the Hebrews around 1300 BC. Between 15 and 18 generations later, with the chief priesthood getting handed down father to son, Sariah becomes the chief priest. In 586 BC, in the 19th year of Nebuchadnezzar's reign, Sariah is executed and his son is taken captive to Persia. Jerusalem was sacked and all Hebrew records, including their laws and Old Testament, were burned at the Temple of Jerusalem. In 458, Ezra is commissioned to reestablish the Hebrew religion. At this point, the author goes through the math of these generations of men, only to show the disparity of time. His point is to show you, the reader, that there is possibly errors in the timeline as you go by the biblical account. Ezra would have been 127 years old, reestablishing the Hebrew religion and law. He believes that perhaps it was Ezra's grandfather and not his father who was executed. He does all this because he is trying to figure out when the last original writings of Adam and Eve were seen. He comes to the conclusion that Hekiah or Azariah were the last to see the original writings from before the sacking of Jerusalem. Azariah is Ezra's grandfather, and he would have passed the information down to his son, Sariah, who would have passed it down to his son, Ezra. He also talks of the translation to English and how the words without form and void more literally would read, raging inundations and horrendous winds. He now goes through Ezra's reconstruction of Genesis. 1. Because of the usage of tree, fruit, serpent, cherubim, and other words which were glyphs in the picture language of prehistory, it is evident that the creation of Adam and Eve stories were probably written in glyphs of Naga, the predominant language of the Eastern Hemisphere 11,500 years ago. 2. Moses and possibly Aaron may have had access to these tablets or Egyptian versions of them. Or 3. Neither Moses nor Aaron knew how to read the ancient language, therefore read the glyphs quite literally. 4. Not being able to read symbolism of Naga glyphs, in addition to reading them literally, Moses, Aaron, and possibly Ezra read into the Adam and Eve story the social and religious attitudes of their day. In that time, women were regarded as the root of all sin, a lowly creature, birth recorded only as an exception, and basically being the cause of man's downfall. This attitude persists in some religions, even in our time. 5. The fusing of two stories, P and J versions, into making Genesis 1, 2, and 3 may confuse the man with Adam. Is it possible that Adam, being only 9 generations ahead of Noah, with the same time span of the Sudan Basin polar era, covering 5,000 years, was not the man referred to in the creation, but his name and later experiences merge with the man's story? Ezra's account to the 5 scribes show that he is unaware that 5,000 years transpired between Genesis 1 and Noah's flood. It is clear that Ezra's 3:9, that Genesis 1 and Noah's flood represent 2 inundations. However, when speaking of the 2 occasions, he refers to them as Noah's flood, but says, "And again, in the process of time, thou broughtest the flood upon those that dwelt in the world and destroyedst them." Now, we mentioned before that the lineage of the high priest from Aaron to Ezra differs in numbers of generations, 17 or 20, and the names as presented in 1 and 2 Esdras, and both differ in lineages from Noah to Jesus, approximately 51 generations in the Bible, making him question which generations were omitted. The Naga glyphs given to us by Esdras through Moses' direct reading are cherubim, man, fruit, rib, woman, serpent, Adam, sleep, tree, and flaming sword. Our knowledge of the Naga glyphs tells us that the tree of life symbolized a mother continent, a parent civilization lasting thousands of years longer than ours today. An unadorned serpent representing water or ocean. A serpent entwined about the tree signifies that the mother continent was surrounded by water. Genesis 3 describes 15 Eve's heel on the serpent's head, showing her victory over the ocean. Cherubims are actually hybrid men and beasts in the days of old, not plump babies, and were the glyphs for legs or foundations or underpinnings. Instead of being placed in the Garden of Eden, one was taken away. The Naga, Mayan, and Egyptian Book of the Dead show that the cherubims of north, east, south, and west were taken away, meaning the foundations for the mother continent in all directions were taken away, removed, or destroyed. The flaming sword was a symbol for fire and earthquake. The fire signified what legends of the past cataclysms called earth fire, and maybe man's concept of hell and hellfire. Going back to the tree, fruit growing on the tree symbolizes mankind settling the continent ages before Adam and Eve. Their eating of the fruit tells us that they were descendants from the original mankind of the continent. Eve eating first signifies that she is the generation after Adam, making her his daughter. The glyph of creation has 3 figures represented. The top is the face of a sleeping or dead person. In the Naga, both represented by this one symbol. The middle figure is a male and the bottom figure is a female. She represents the mother of all mankind. In addition, there are curved lines from the sleeping or dead person's face and the male to the bottom female figure. This glyph has been taken to mean that the male figure was put to sleep and a rib was taken. The rib is the curved lines and fashioned into the bottom figure, the mother of all mankind. The author notes that the top sleeping or dead person is that of a female. And in the Naga, the curved lines denote parentage rather than ribs, and he believes that the glyph is a dead female whose offspring by the male, little figure in the middle, Adam, is the bottom figure, Eve. Eve, the mother of the Hebrews. Here is the breakdown of the story from the glyphs of a land that was surrounded entirely by water. Adam and Eve lived in the Garden of Eden in the mother continent, were descendants from original mankind. Eve was Adam's daughter, and he was a widower. They realized that in order to survive, they had to leave and never return because the motherland was to be destroyed by an impending cataclysm inundation. Afterward, the continent was subjected to a fiery earthquake, during which it lost its foundations and sank to the bottom of the sea. On a side note, I had to look up Solon, who was mentioned earlier in the text. He is an Athenian statesman, lawmaker, and poet who lived between 630 and 560 BC. He also happens to be Plato's uncle. Plato is the man who gave us the first account of Atlantis.
All right, that was chapter 3. What do you guys think? Honestly, not where I thought it was going to go at all. Fascinating, nonetheless. Fascinating. All right, well, if chapter 4 is anything like chapter 3 was, just expect it to take a couple of days because, yeah. Anyway, if you like what you saw, please like, share, subscribe. Leave some comments. Tell me what you think. Yeah, have a great day.